Have you ever made a split-second decision that felt, incredibly right? Like a gut feeling that just guided you perfectly?
Oh, absolutely. Or conversely, maybe you've had one of those instant judgments that looking back was just completely off base.
Exactly. It's something we all experience, isn't it? That immediate, sometimes really powerful reaction you can't quite explain.
Sometimes it feels like a secret weapon, other times, well, not a major blind spot.
Right. And today we're diving deep into that whole world of thinking without thinking. It's what Malcolm Gladwell explored in his book, Blink,
Yeah, it's all about those super fast judgments, the ones we often make in like the first 2 seconds.
and how they can sometimes reveal these profound truths or just as easily lead us completely astray.
We're looking at how our minds process things incredibly fast, often way below our conscious radar, shaping how we see things and what we do.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to really unpack how this rapid cognition, Gladwell calls it thin slicing, actually works
We'll look at some, frankly, surprising examples of its power.
and explore the hidden dangers too, because it's not foolproof.
Definitely not. And then, maybe most importantly, think about how we can actually, train or educate our unconscious minds.
To make better snap judgments. So yeah, let's jump right in and see what's behind that blink.
Okay, where should we start? Maybe with that Getty Koros story.
Oh, perfect example, yeah. So picture the Getty Museum back in the 80s. They're trying to become this major player.
Welding up
right?
their collection.
Exactly. And they're about to drop nearly $10 million on this statue, a Koros, the standing Greek figure.
Supposedly ancient, from 530 BC.
Right, and they spend 14 months, 14, doing all the scientific tests, the legal checks, everything.
All the due diligence.
Yeah.
Scientists, lawyers, everyone signs off. Looks totally legit.
And this is the kicker, when the real art experts, the people who've spent their lives looking at Greek sculpture, saw it, totally different story.
Yeah, like Federico Zeri, this top Italian art historian. He apparently just zeroed in on the fingernails and felt this wrongness. Couldn't quite place it, but it felt off.
And Evelyn Harrison, another big name. The moment she saw it, she just blurted out, "I'm sorry to hear that." An instant, unconscious reaction.
And Georgios Dantas from the Benaki Museum, he called it an intuitive repulsion.
Intuitive repulsion. I mean, what a phrase, right? So after all that careful, deliberate 14-month investigation.
These experts, in basically 2 seconds, just knew.
And what was the final verdict?
Well, they were spot on. Total forgery, modern fake.
No way.
Yeah. Later, they found fake letters, postmarks that didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
And the statue itself was just this weird mashup of different styles.
Wow. So their 2-second blink.
Revealed more than all that research.
Yeah.
It really makes you question what knowing something means, doesn't it? Sometimes it's not about spreadsheets and data.
It's that trained intuition, that thin slicing, as Gladwell puts it, finding patterns from just tiny slivers of experience.
Our unconscious mind just crunching away, seeing things we don't consciously register.
Okay, so that's art experts, highly trained intuition. But what about, regular people? Can our bodies react before our brains catch up?
Ah, the Iowa gambling experiment. Great example of exactly that.
Right. Tell us about that setup.
Okay, so scientists set up this card game. 4 decks, 2 red, 2 blue.
And the red decks were?
High risk, high reward. Big wins, but also big losses. The blue decks were safer, smaller wins, but steady.
Got it. The goal is just to win as much money as possible.
Exactly. Now here's the wild part. After only about 10 cards, people's palms started sweating. Physical stress response when they reached for those risky red decks.
Only 10 cards, but did they know the decks were bad yet?
Nope, not
Yeah.
consciously. It took them about another 40 cards before they could even say they had a hunch, before they could articulate why the red decks felt bad.
So their bodies knew way before their conscious minds did.
Precisely. Their behavior started shifting towards the safer blue decks long before they could explain it. The unconscious figured out the pattern first.
That's incredible. This adaptive unconscious is constantly working. Does it apply to something like relationships?
Oh, absolutely. Look at John Gottman's work, the famous Love Lab.
Right, where he filmed couples talking.
Yeah, talking about everyday stuff,
Hmm.
maybe a disagreement. And he developed this incredibly detailed coding system. SPAF, he called it.
What did that track?
Everything. Every emotion, every facial flicker, tone of voice, fidgeting, even heart rate. He coded every second.
Intense. And what could he predict from that?
Get this. After watching a couple for just 1 hour, he could predict with 95% accuracy if they'd still be married 15 years later.
95% from 1 hour.
Yep. And even with just 15 minutes, it was still around 90% accuracy. Even 3 minutes gave him a really good idea.
So he's basically thin slicing their entire future relationship based on these tiny interactions?
Exactly. And he believed our unconscious does a kind of automated, accelerated version of his detailed analysis all the time.
So what were the key signals? What were the big giveaways he looked for?
He called them the 4 horsemen of the marital apocalypse.
Yeah.
You had defensiveness, stonewalling, criticism.
Okay.
And the most damaging one, contempt. That feeling of looking down on your partner like you're superior.
Ah, contempt. Yeah, you can see how that would be corrosive.
Totally. It's like a total rejection. And it often comes across in just fleeting facial expressions, tone of voice, tiny cues our unconscious picks up on.
It makes you wonder what signals we miss every day, right? Okay, so art, gambling, marriage. What about judging competence, like in teaching?
Nalini Ambati did fascinating work there. She had students watch really short, silent video clips of teachers, like 3 10-second clips.
Silent clips, okay? And they rated the teachers.
Yeah, on effectiveness. And here's the amazing part.
Mm-hmm.
The ratings were basically the same, even when they only saw 5-second clips. Or even 2-second clips.
2 second? Seriously?
Seriously. And those snap judgments, those 2-second ratings, were remarkably consistent with evaluations from students who had had those teachers for a whole semester.
Wow. So our adaptive unconscious is pretty good at spotting competence quickly.
It seems so. Like an internal radar for effectiveness, even with minimal information.
And didn't Ambati also look at surgeons and lawsuits? That seemed counterintuitive.
Right. You'd think, logically, surgeons who get sued more just make more mistakes, more errors, more lawsuits.
Yeah, makes sense.
But the research showed that's not really the main driver. The number of mistakes wasn't the strongest predictor.
So what was?
It was about how patients felt they were treated. Did they feel rushed, ignored, treated poorly on a personal level? That, combined with a bad outcome, was key.
Okay, so bedside manner matters, but how did she measure that quickly?
This is cool. She analyzed just 40 seconds of surgeons' conversations with patients, but she filtered the audio so you couldn't understand the words, only the tone, pitch, rhythm. Content-filtered speech.
Just the sound, not the meaning.
Exactly. And she found surgeons whose voices sounded more dominant, maybe less caring, were significantly more likely to have been sued in the past.
Whereas the ones who sounded more concerned, less dominant.
Much less likely to have been sued. It wasn't what they said, it was how they sounded in those brief moments. That tone conveyed a whole lot.
That's incredible. It shows just how powerful those nonverbal, thin-sliced cues are. But, okay, as we said, this stuff isn't always right. It can go wrong.
Oh, definitely. It has a real dark side.
Which brings us to Warren Harding. The Warren Harding error, as Gladwell calls it.
Right. So picture this. 1899. A lawyer named Harry Doherty sees Warren Harding across a room. And Doherty instantly thinks, that guy looks like a president. Just based on his appearance.
Even though Harding wasn't, well, the sharpest tool in the shed.
Exactly. By most accounts, Harding was pretty unintelligent, kind of wishy-washy on policy. But he looked the part. Tall, handsome, distinguished, great voice. Almost Roman features, they said.
So people just assumed he was presidential material because he looked it?
Pretty much. His appearance was so powerful, it basically short-circuited people's normal judgment process. They saw the look, they didn't look deeper. It's a classic case of a misleading first impression.
And he ended up being not a great president.
Widely considered one of the worst, yeah. The appearance totally masked the lack of substance.
It really drives home how much we judge books by their covers, doesn't it? Which kind of leads into the implicit association test, the IAT.
Right, the IAT, that's a tool that measures our unconscious biases. It looks at how quickly we link concepts in our minds.
Like associating, say, male with career versus female with career, or certain races with good or bad concepts.
Exactly. And what the IAT often reveals is that our unconscious attitudes can be completely different from our conscious beliefs.
How so?
Well, for instance, a huge percentage of people, even those who genuinely believe in racial equality, show faster associations and unconscious bias favoring white over black on the test.
Even if they consciously reject that bias.
Yes. And these hidden biases can subtly leak out in our behavior. Maybe leaning away slightly from someone in an interview or, those statistics about CEOs.
Right, the tall white men thing.
Yeah, the fact that being taller correlates with higher salaries. It's like our unconscious absorbs societal patterns and stereotypes and acts on them without us even realizing.
It's kind of sobering, realizing there's this whole layer associations influencing us that we're not fully aware of, but some people fight it, right? Like Bob Gulum, the car salesman.
Ah, Glum, yeah. He's fascinating. Sells way more cars than average. And his explicit rule.
You cannot prejudge people in this business.
Exactly. He actively, consciously fights that Warren Harding error. He makes a point of treating every customer exactly the same when they walk in.
Because the farmer covered in mud might have cash and the teenager might come back with parents?
Precisely. He knows his first impression, his initial blink based on appearance, could easily be wrong and cost him a sale, so he overrides it.
That takes real discipline. It also points to another problem. Gladwell talks about the storytelling problem.
Right. This is the idea that we're really good at making up explanations for our decisions or feelings, especially the ones driven by our unconscious.
Even if the explanations aren't actually true.
Yeah. Our conscious mind wants a narrative, a reason. So if the real reason is unconscious, the conscious mind just invents one that sounds plausible.
Like in speed dating.
Perfect example. People will say they want certain qualities in a partner, but then in the actual speed dating moment, they're attracted to people who don't match their stated criteria at all. There's a disconnect.
Between the conscious ideal and the unconscious reaction.
Exactly. Or Ted Williams, the baseball player. He swore he could see the ball hit the bat.
But physics says no.
Right, biomechanics show the ball's moving way too fast. His explanation felt right to him, but it didn't match the reality of his unconscious, lightning-fast actions.
And that rope puzzle experiment.
Yeah.
Mare's puzzle.
Yeah, people were stuck trying to tie two ropes hanging from the ceiling, too far apart to grab both at once.
Okay.
The experimenter would casually walk by and accidentally brush one rope, setting it swinging slightly. That was the hint needed to solve it. Tie something heavy to one rope, swing it like a pendulum.
Ah, clever.
And people solved it. But when asked how they figured it out, they came up with all sorts of elaborate, incorrect stories. They didn't consciously register the hint.
So the unconscious saw the swinging rope, got the idea, but the conscious mind took the credit with a made-up story.
Pretty much. We often don't know the real reasons for our actions, but we feel like we do.
Okay, so if our instincts are powerful, but also flawed and hard to understand, how do we get better? How do we educate that blink?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really comes down to understanding context and knowing when to trust that gut feeling and when to be skeptical.
Like with the new Coke disaster. They trusted the data, right? The blind taste tests.
They did. The sip tests showed people preferred the sweeter taste of new Coke over Pepsi and over original Coke. Seems logical to switch.
But it bombed spectacularly. Why?
Because they ignored context. As this marketer Louis Cheskin pointed out with his idea of sensation transference, we don't just taste the liquid. We taste the brand, the packaging, the history, the color.
All those unconscious associations.
Exactly. Cheskin had shown earlier that people thought margarine tasted better if it was yellow and wrapped in foil, even if it was identical to white margarine in plain wrapping. The packaging transferred sensations of quality.
So with Coke, people weren't just tasting the sweetness in a blind test. They were missing the whole feeling of Coke.
Right. As Gladwell says, in the real world, no one ever drinks Coca-Cola blind. You have to account for the whole unconscious package deal. Tripping away context gave them the wrong answer.
That makes total sense. Context is key.
Yeah.
What about the Aaron chair, the Herman Miller chair, that weird mesh thing?
Another great example of context, but in a different way. When they first showed prototypes, people hated the look.
Called it lawn furniture.
Right.
Really low aesthetic scores.
Terrible scores. But Herman Miller also had data showing it was incredibly comfortable once you actually used it for a while. And they had internal conviction.
So they didn't just rely on that negative first impression.
No. They trusted the comfort scores and their own design sense. They realized that sometimes a negative first blink, especially for something truly new, might just be unfamiliarity, not a fundamental flaw.
And over time, people got used to it.
Exactly. It became familiar, then accepted, then iconic.
Yeah.
It shows that sometimes our initial reaction needs time and experience to evolve. Not all bad first impressions are accurate warnings.
That's a really important distinction. Okay, shifting gears again, Cook County Hospital and the chest pain algorithm. This seemed counterintuitive, too.
Yeah, you had doctors in a busy ER trying to figure out who was having a heart attack and who wasn't. High stakes.
And they were making mistakes. Or being overly cautious.
Both. They were missing some heart attacks, but also admitting lots of people who weren't having one just to be safe, which clogged up the ER. They were considering everything, all the patient data.
And the solution was less information.
Kinda, yeah. This cardiologist, Lee Goldman, developed an algorithm basically a decision tree based on just a few key factors. ECG results, blood pressure, fluid in the lungs, unstable angina. Much simpler.
And how did it perform compared to the doctors?
Significantly better. It was 70% better at correctly identifying patients who weren't having a heart attack, freeing up beds, and still over 95% accurate for the serious cases.
Wow. So the doctors, trying to be thorough, were actually getting muddled by too much information.
Seems like it. Sometimes having less, but the right information, allows for a clearer, faster, more accurate judgment. It filters out the noise.
Less can be more, which also connects to that military exercise, right? The Millennium Challenge.
Oh, yeah. Van Riper.
Yeah.
Classic case. Huge $250 million war game.
Blue team is the U.S. military, all the tech, sensors, data, complex planning.
Information overload, basically. Rigorous, rational analysis. Against them is the red team, led by Paul Van Riper, playing a rogue commander in the Persian Gulf. Much fewer resources.
And red team won. How?
Decisively. Van Riper completely bypassed blue team's high-tech surveillance. He used motorcycle couriers for messages, old-school light signals from mosques, things they weren't even looking for.
Low tech against high tech.
Then he overwhelmed their defenses, sent out a swarm of small boats, civilian boats mixed in with military ones, launched a massive, synchronized cruise missile attack,
And the result in the simulation?
sank most of the U.S. fleet. 16 ships, simulated casualties of 20,000 personnel. Blue team was paralyzed.
Why? Too much analysis.
Too much information, too rigid a process. They were trying to know everything before acting. Van Riper embraced chaos, speed, unpredictability, what he called command and out of control. He let his commanders use initiative, make snap judgments.
So in that fast-moving situation, intuition and rapid cognition beat exhaustive analysis.
Right. Trying to consciously analyze everything actually got in the way. It's like verbal overshadowing. Sometimes trying to explain or analyze something complex hinders your ability to actually do it or perceive it properly.
But then you have situations where rapid judgments go tragically wrong because of the speed, like the Amadou Diallo shooting.
A truly tragic example of thin slicing failure under extreme stress. 4 officers, plainclothes, thought Diallo was reaching for a gun.
When he was reaching for his wallet.
Right. They fired 41 shots. They completely misread the situation. They saw terror on his face and interpreted it as aggression or brazenness, a catastrophic mind-reading failure.
And Gladwell attributes this partly to the extreme stress they were under.
Exactly. He talks about what happened when your heart rate spikes, say above 175 BPM. Your cognitive processing can just break down.
Tunnel vision.
Diminished hearing, loss of fine motor skills, and crucially what he calls temporary autism or mind blindness. You lose the ability to read subtle social cues, to understand what someone else might be thinking or feeling.
So the officers, in that state, couldn't accurately interpret Diallo's actions or fear.
They likely couldn't. And the lack of time and distance, what Gladwell calls white space, between them and Diallo, forced them into these primitive, automatic, fear-based reactions instead of careful observation.
There was no time for a more considered judgment.
No time to slow down, which is why good training is so important in those fields.
Training to manage the stress.
Yes, things like stress inoculation for bodyguards or specific police procedures for, say, traffic stops, how to position the car, where to stand, using lights.
It's all designed to create that white space.
Exactly. To slow things down, even by fractions of a second, create distance, manage the arousal level so officers can rely more on trained observation and less on pure, potentially flawed reflex. It's about educating the instincts for high-stakes moments.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. It feels like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. It's clear our snap judgments, our first impressions are incredibly powerful, right? Often happening behind that locked door of the unconscious.
But also, they're really fallible. They can be thrown off by bias, like the Warren Harding thing, or by having too much information, like the Cook County doctors initially, or definitely by extreme stress, like in the Diallo tragedy.
Absolutely. But the key takeaway, I think, the hopeful part, is that this isn't fixed. Our ability to thin slice isn't set in stone.
We can get better at it.
Yeah, through building real expertise, through deliberate practice and training, and just by being more aware of our own biases and the importance of context, we can learn to educate and, to some extent, control those instincts.
We can make better decisions in that blink of an eye if we work at it. We can kind of peek behind that locked door.
Exactly. Unlock it a bit.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to take away. Think about an area in your own life. Could be a tough decision you're wrestling with, maybe starting a new relationship, or even a creative project.
Somewhere you tend to overthink things, maybe get bogged down in too much information or analysis.
Right. How might things change if you tried to embrace the power of an educated blink in that area? Trusting your refined intuition more while also understanding its limits.
What new approaches or, what new possibilities might that open up for you? Something to think about.